Welcome in, Whappers, where today we're going to be talking about more Atlantic revolutions inspired by the Enlightenment. So far, we've compiled a list of 3 revolutions that were inspired by the Enlightenment, all within the Atlantic world. 1, the American Revolution. 2, the French Revolution. And 3, the Haitian Revolution, which we just discussed today. But today we add 2 more. And all 2 that we're going to talk about tie back in some way, shape, or form to the other 3 Atlantic revolutions. And the 2 we're going to learn about today is Mexico and South America. So let's get down to Mexico here, our neighbors to the south. So in Mexico, the Mexicans were seeking to eliminate Spanish rule, and for almost an 11-year period, a bloody struggle, the Mexicans were able to liberate themselves from Spanish rule and declare their independence in 1821. The Mexican Revolution, there's some key points about the Mexican Revolution. I'm going to try something new here. I did this with my 7th graders, and they seem to like it. And because I'm running out of time, during the day, I sort of made a whiteboard, kind of a la the Chem Doctor here. Now, the problem is holding it up. I kind of feel like I'm a little awkward, but we'll make it work here. So I have some key points to go along with the Mexican Revolution. First of all, it broke out beginning in 1810, and it lasted until about 1821. So I mentioned before, about an 11-year period. One of the first instigators of the Mexican Revolution against the Spanish was a Catholic priest who appealed broadly to the Mexican population living there, and his name was Father Hidalgo. That was his last name, Hidalgo. So if you ever see that name, you want to tie that back to the Mexican Revolution. Now, in class tomorrow, I'm going to show you one of the geniuses behind Father Hidalgo, aside from galvanizing groups of people. He created a song that became kind of like the anthem of the revolution against the Spanish, and that was the Grito de Dolores. Now, I don't speak Spanish, so I apologize if I butchered that, but we're going to take a look at that tomorrow. Now, Hidalgo was one of the real instigators, one of the real shakers and movers of the Mexican Revolution. Unfortunately, he was killed and executed during the revolution, and sort of one of the names that comes up on AP exams as the guy that sort of picked up the movement and continued the fight against the Spanish was a peasant. So a small-time peasant named Jose Morelos. And Jose Morelos would go on to help instigate and continue the fight once Hidalgo was killed. Morelos and Hidalgo, their efforts, really you can kind of boil it down to 3 main points. If you look at the French Revolution, they were trying to get rid of a monarchy. In the Mexican Revolution, the Spanish government, the Spanish crown, was the controlling factor. So the Mexican Revolution shares that in common with the Spanish, shares that in common in that they were trying to get rid of the Spanish crown. So very similar to our other Enlightenment influenced revolutions. What the Mexicans were going for were three main points. 1, they wanted independence from Spain. 2, they wanted to promote racial equality. Slavery existed in the Spanish Empire, not as much in Mexico, but it did exist there. So racial equality was a big point, especially amongst the Creoles and the mestizos and mulattoes, the generations that had been sort of cast down into the bottom of Spanish colonial society. But the most important point, and this one comes up a lot on AP exams, the most important one to remember about the early Mexican Revolution is land redistribution. And what land redistribution means, I'll keep that up there one more time. What land redistribution means is effectively that you take the land from the upper class, the land-owning elites, and you redistribute it, you spread it out amongst everybody. So the idea is that nobody effectively owns more land than anyone else. And this becomes one of the pillars of the Mexican Revolution. I always want you guys to remember this idea of land redistribution. And this idea of land redistribution isn't going to just be tied to the Mexican Revolution of the 1800s. This is going to be a theme that comes up in other revolutions that we study throughout the year. Ones like Cuba, China, Vietnam, all sorts of revolutions are going to tie back to the idea of land redistribution. And that was, above all, one of the most important points for you guys to remember about the Mexican Revolution. Now, we're going to swing things on down to South America, where we talk about other revolutions that were breaking out against the Spanish. So down in South America, what was going on was very similar to Mexico in that there was an attempt to revolt against the Spanish government. Spain was really on the ropes here. And maybe you're wondering, because I kind of blitzed through the Mexico part, why was Spain on the ropes throughout the early 1800s? Well, a lot of that had to do with Napoleon. Napoleon was ransacking Europe, and the pressure from Napoleon made Spain's empire abroad much weaker. So that's how it kind of ties back to what's going on over there in France. And speaking of tying to France, the main hero of the South American revolutions that are going to happen in the early 1800s is a man named Simón Bolívar. And Simón Bolívar was an Enlightenment educated man. He spent many years actually in France living there. He studied the Enlightenment. He was involved in some of the Salon discussions. And Bolívar is going to bring those ideas back to his continent in South America. And Bolívar is without a doubt the enigmatic, the key, the catalyst for a rash of revolutions that break out all throughout South America. Now, South America is fascinating because it's just sheerly massive territory to cover. And yet Bolívar would lead revolutions in 6 future countries. I'm not going to name all 6 because you don't need to memorize all 6. But as you can imagine, Bolivia is one, Peru, Venezuela, Colombia. Just incredible. So much land to cover. And this took place over so many years where Bolívar fought and led armies, usually guerrilla style, against the Spanish. Now, like with the Mexican Revolution, we have heavy Enlightenment influence here. And one of the key points about Bolívar was land redistribution. That was a core tenet of the Mexican Revolution, and Bolívar pushed for land redistribution as well in South America as it was in Mexico. Now, what was going on in South America there, Bolívar inspired dozens of different revolutions over time. Some failed miserably. But Bolívar was really an expert at building armies up from the ground, and these armies would ultimately fight bloody conflict after bloody conflict till eventually the Spanish capitulated and surrendered control in certain territories. Bolívar, as I mentioned, would lead to revolutions in 6 future South American countries. But what's fascinating is the question I have in the bottom. We have the United States of America where multiple colonies banded together as one to defeat a common enemy. But this didn't happen in South America. You didn't have common enemy. You didn't have a common bond amongst the people. And actually, Spanish law prevented the different colonies there from even communicating with each other. There were severe punishments for people that tried to collaborate. So as different revolutions broke out in modern-day countries like Venezuela and Bolivia and Colombia, for example, the people there were not unified. So Bolívar had to lead separate revolutions in all these places. And that's why, in the end, South America isn't a United States of South America. The people weren't all unified together. They had different regional beliefs. They had different regional ideas. They were very fragmented from one another. But yet they shared the common goal of eradicating the Spanish. This was an extremely bloody time in South America. And some of these revolutions took, almost 30 to 40 years to hatch. Bolívar was, throughout the entire process, though, one of the heroes. And Bolívar failed many times, but ultimately succeeded, with a lot of help from, not from the United States, but from Haiti. The Haitians actually saw what Bolívar was doing and gave the Bolívar and his revolutionaries a lot of support against the Spanish. And for Spain, think about it from Spain's perspective. You lose Mexico and you lose almost all of South America within the same time period. This was a crushing blow to the Spanish Empire. And it really is the beginning of the end of Spain's dominance in the Western Hemisphere. So 2 more regions of the world are strongly affected by the Enlightenment: Mexico and South America. We'll fill in the gaps tomorrow. Bring questions if you have them. But keep in mind the key names of the Mexican heroes, Simón Bolívar, and we'll talk more in context tomorrow about the importance of these revolutions in the Atlantic world. So, as always, I bid you guys a good evening. The past shapes the future. Take care, Whappers.